Hello everyone, I'm CoolGuy, welcome back. Today's video is a little bit different, I don't even know what to call it really. Bungie's talking about sunsetting, that's a whole different side of the discussion. Whether you're for it or against it, I think both sides are going to have an opinion on what's said today. With sunsetting going forward, this is something that I believe needs to be kind of realized. In a game like Destiny, you worry about things like power creep. There are a lot of weapons and archetypes that won't even really get on the fringe of power creep because the archetypes are in such a bad spot. With my channel, my content, I get into gun stats, ranges, damage profiles. Note that I'm not saying that everything needs to be powerful. And kinda, there almost needs to be somewhat bad weapons, but not as bad as some are currently. And it's not just a bad weapon, it's a whole archetype. Some need a lot of help. I have some perfect examples today of what I mean. I'm going to be talking about PvE and PvP. I wanted to make this as a feedback video. I want to point out some things I see as a player with these guns and weapons. And when sunsetting goes forward, if nothing changes, they're pretty much going to be in the same spot. And with archetypes, it means that different things need to be done for PvE and PvP. In each side of the game, they struggle. And remember, a buff can mean a couple things. For PvP, it could mean ease of use, maybe a damage profile changing, maybe a little bit more range, a little bit more stability. A buff can mean it could have the same time to kill, say it has a 1 second time to kill, but not making the user land all headshots to get that. There's a lot to talk about. For PvE, changes usually mean more damage on a specific enemy type. For most archetypes, not all, but for most, the extremes of an RPM are in a really good spot. Hard hitting and then rapid fire. Like hard hitting, high impact pulse rifles are really good. Rapid fire frames like Horror's Least, really good. Scout rifles, Jade Rabbit, hard hitting, 0.8 TTK, 3 headshots, really good. The other end of the spectrum, rapid fire like Randy's, it's got a relaxed TTK. This is more so about the between RPMs, and what I want to uncover is that there's a lot of weapons in Destiny that just have zero identity. Where I want to start is where I believe is arguably the weakest weapon in the entire game, archetype-wise. And it's also one of the best arguments for the theme of the video, the 180 RPM Scout. Sunsetting in theory is going to allow new fun weapons to shine. Power creep is trying to get checked at the door as weapons fall off and new ones come in. Let's go back to the time of the Oxygen SR3. This was a Pinnacle Vanguard. It had Dragonfly, Mega Nura. Dragonfly deals more damage based on the number of precision hits dealt beforehand. To this day on paper, with what it does, it should be somewhat of a powerhouse, but in reality, for PvE, it's very weak. For a long time, I've seen the community members ask for a scout buff. I agree with that, but we have a weapon here that has powerful qualities, just collecting dust in our vaults. And it looks like this weapon's gonna get sunset. It's just gonna sit there, never having the opportunity to shine. It's almost like it never happened. So let's fast forward. Say sunsetting happens, and a new 180 RPM scout gets a special treatment, one of these powerful weapons to go out and chase. It's one of these new powerful rewards. Say it's this Oxygen. Even with like the defining standout perks, Oxygen still wouldn't shine. And I look at it like that. In theory, this would be the type of weapon we would get in the future, but that doesn't change how bad of a spot the 180 RPM scouts are. It struggled back then, it's gonna struggle 6 months from now. So the archetype, the damage profile needs a little bit of help in PvE. You can make weapons go away all you want, and you have new ones come forward, but if the makeup of the weapon doesn't change, it's kind of more of the same. Like that's one of my worst fears. In PvP, it's also one of the worst archetypes used, aside from, like, let's say a No Feelings that has box breathing. That's an outlier because of box, and just because it has box breathing, that means absolutely nothing to the other 180s in the game. The 180 scouts are a 3-head, 1 body, a 1 second time to kill. They deal 55 to the head, 35 to the body. The 200 RPMs deal 54 to the head, 31 to the body. They deal 1 damage less per critical, so they shoot faster, they deal 1 less per headshot. They're also 3 crit and 1 body. Does anyone see the issue with that? The 150 RPMs, like Jade Rabbit, hard hitting, 0.8 TTK, you're rewarded with 3 straight criticals. They feel pretty good. The other end, fast firing, Randy's, they're a 3 crit, 2 body. They feel pretty good. This in-between area, the 200s are simply just gonna win out. That's even if you decided to run a scout that isn't a 150 or a fast firing in the Crucible. So the 180s just simply lack identity. So minimum to me for the Crucible, they need to at least be a 2-head, 2 body. I don't see anything wrong with that. That wouldn't make them super powerful. It would just make them a tad bit more viable. And you could even make them match the same exact damage profile as a 180 RPM hand cannon, 57 to the head, 38 to the body. Because when we go forward, this issue is still there. It doesn't matter how powerful you want to make it, how cool you want to make it. The archetype struggles, even within its own class. Next, another example, let's talk about 450 RPM lightweight pulses. The only ones that truly feel good are the exotics, Outbreak, Bad Juju. This is because of that powerful quality, the exotic perks. It's the legendaries that struggle, Infinite Pass, Chattering Bone, Nightshade, and in PvP, The high impacts reward a clean 2 burst, 0.67 TTK, 6 criticals, that's your Einsteins, your Redricks. Then we have the aggressive frame, the 4 burst. They're a little bit relaxed, 6 crit, 2 body, 0.73 TTK. The adaptive, like Bygone, super relaxed, 5 crit, 2 body, 0.93. Fast firing, Horror's Least, very fast, and competitive TTK of 0.8, 7 crit and 2 body. Let's circle back to these lightweight frames. You need to land 8 criticals, all headshots, for the second slowest pulse rifle TTK in the game of 0.87. You can't miss a bullet, and let's remember that this is also sharing the same exact range as a hand cannon, the same range as a 600 RPM auto rifle, and those 600 autos are at a 0.7 TTK. So if you're using a Nightshade, or say these get sunset, when they get sunset, these new lightweight pulses are still gonna have these issues. You're still not gonna be able to miss one bullet. You can't miss anything. One bullet cannot be out of range, cannot have drop off. When you engage and you get flinched, not one bullet can be thrown off, because if you do, that 0.87 that's already the second slowest isn't going to be achieved. The point is, as we're moving along, this isn't going to change after sunset. These are still going to be the way that they are. Even in PvE, exotics excluded because they do shine there. Your Chattering Bones and your Infinite Pass still struggle. So these legendary 450s, again, like I've said, they have sort of an identity crisis. They have a good lightweight frame, but you're making the user in PvP land literally 100% accuracy for a 0.87 TTK. So yeah, if the sandbox doesn't change, all of this is still there. This is just another archetype that could use some sort of buff, because it currently has 0 user error. You cannot miss a shot. And when you do land all your shots, you're achieving one of the slowest TTKs in the game. The average TTK is about a 0.8. Even going back to the rapid fire frames of a 0.8, they can still miss some headshots. You can have some body shots in there. But as I go on, it may just be that these weapons aren't supposed to do well, but my thought is if I can't get any like tangible work out of them as a player, like why are we still creating them and why do they exist? And that goes all the way back to Oxygen earlier. Like, don't even waste resources on them. Like, they're in such a bad spot. The entire archetype of them needs help. I really pay attention to gun stats. I really pay attention to TTKs. And some of them just don't get touched for so long that if we're gonna just keep continuing, they're gonna struggle then too. Moving on to the SMGs, like almost all of them need some help. Like you have a 600 RPM SMG class that does 23 to the head, 16 to the body, and an AR class of 600 RPM that does 26 to the head and 16 to the body. And the ARs have way better recoil, way better stability. With the SMG, you get a little bit closer zoom factor for the CQC fights, but in reality, why use it over something like a shotgun? Why use it over a 600 RPM AR, even for a 15 meter, 20 meter engagement distance? You have the aggressive frame SMGs like Cold Front that's near unusable because of their archetype. And that comes down to the stability. Like, have you ever used an aggressive with a controller? It's a very painful experience. And on the flip side, when you look at something like Recluse, that was a weapon that was on the fringe, that archetype, and that went over because of Master of Arms. And even when they nerfed Master of Arms, it's still one of the most used weapon in the entire game. But again, that's only Recluse. That doesn't mean anything to the other 900s. That doesn't mean anything to the other 600s and so on. So when we get to this point of sunset, you're still gonna have an SMG that literally shoots the same RPM as an auto rifle, but it does less damage. It has more recoil. You have an SMG that feels like you're on a boat when you're firing it. All of that doesn't change when you make powerful new stuff. Like we're still gonna have pretty much the same game here if these in-between archetypes don't get changed. And to talk about that a little bit more, let's move on to hand cannons. I know a lot of you love them, but I also know a lot of you hate them. But what's happening here is a real shame with the hand cannons. Again, most of them have an identity crisis. When they changed the range stat on these, it brought all of them, I mean all of them, to the same range. I went into detail when this happened. You have 4 archetypes of hand cannons, well technically 5 with Warden's Law, but 4 main ones. And remember, these are going against pulse rifles and ARs. The 600s have a 0.7 TTK for an AR. All of these hand cannons have a range of 25 to 28 meters. All of them. Rangefinder, a couple other perks can extend that a little bit as far as fall off, like explosive rounds, but when you have a max range Dire Promise without rangefinder, a max range Spare Rations, it's gonna hit at 28 meters. When you have an Austringer, an Ace of Spades, those are at 28 meters, like period, end of story. If you were to give a gun the same exact skin, like let's say a 140 and a 150 both look like Austringer, all you're gonna notice is that one shoots faster because the TTK range is gonna be near the exact same. One's gonna do 68 to the head, one's gonna do 70. The fall off of the damage is near negligible, but you're gonna notice that one has a really good frame of lightweight, shoots faster, and literally hits at the same exact distance range as the other. Both are a 3-shot kill. It's to the point, I mean, they're basically the same hand cannon. The bones of them. The true difference, again, is one shoots faster, has a better frame. A lot of them share the same perks. When you compare a 150 to a 140, there's that identity crisis going on for the 140. When you look at the 110s, they used to be known for their range. They at least had that over the other archetypes, but now They're sitting in that 25 to 28 meter range. They get a little bit past that, like up to about 30, but again, they're dueling against some real monsters in the Crucible. Now, this isn't even talking about now, like this is for like the past year and a half. The 110s have low stability, slow reload, poor aim assist. It was a real problem when they are all banded in the same range. I did a video on the Officer Revolver. It's a 180 RPM hand cannon, and those again are basically a sawed-off 180 RPM Scout with the same exact damage profile as a high-impact sidearm, but they're inside of a range that they have no hope to complete, like almost everything out TTKs it. So I don't think that it would hurt to give some of these hand cannons a little bit more range. Maybe one archetype, a little bit better stability. Maybe one, a lot of handling. Some of them could use an ease of use factor, like a 140 being a 2-head, 1-body. Because currently, they need 3 headshots just like the 150s, but they have the same exact range. It's identity. Now, there's a lot more, but I think you guys get the point here today. And the Oxygen really is the perfect example. If you sunset and take away so you could add more things with powerful perks, I think of Oxygen. Because Oxygen is different, it has potential. On paper, it's a monster. And let's revisit one more time. Let's say Oxygen was one of these new powerful weapons later this year after sunsetting occurs. It's still, for a lack of better terms, it's still gonna kinda suck. And it kinda sucks because how the archetype is. Like, it has everything to do with the bones of the weapon where the archetype is. It's still gonna have the same issues versus basic trash mobs. It's gonna have the same issues versus majors. It's a near detriment to your loadout in PvE, it really is. It's still gonna require a 3-head, 1-body for a 1-second flat TCK kill in the Crucible. Lightweight pulses, say they get a powerful perk. That's not gonna change that you need that absurd 8 criticals to land within range that they're already flat out dominated in. It doesn't change in PvE that they're kind of outshined out of the gate. Because I feel that if you do sunset and you give this new loot to chase, that's an exciting thing. But the core of these weapons, some of them need a lot of help, man. Because things won't change in the grand scheme. And when they do, it's gonna be a straight outlier, like Recluse. Something so good that the shortcomings that it has can be made up for. But again, even though that happened to Recluse, what about the other ones? I would like to know what you think about today's video. I do believe that a lot of weapons and archetypes really lack identity compared to others within the same archetype, and then compare those to other weapons. I just fear that we're gonna get Oxygens and weapons like aggressive frame SMGs that you can't even control. And just one more time, I don't want everything to be powerful. There needs to be differences. However, I think that there's just so many of them that could use something like a universal stability buff, a TTK ease of use, a PvE damage buff. Some archetypes could use a little bit more range than the others, and so much more. It doesn't stop with what I just talked about in this video. A lot of them can have their identity just chiseled a little bit more. A lot are so close to others that there's no real advantage. We don't know what they have planned, and that's a lot of this. We don't know what we don't know. But I do feel that the overall sandbox needs some love before sunsetting happens. If you're new here, remember to hit the sub button, and if you're looking for a new controller, use my link down below in the description. I'm partnered with Scuff Gaming, and you can use my code COOL for a discount at checkout. As someone who covers weapons, sees strengths, weaknesses, this is really obvious to me. I want to know if you think maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into this. Maybe you think a lot of these things are fine. I do want to know your thoughts though. Let's talk about it below. Thank you for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.